Welcome to the EasySpeak Speakeasy.
You've unlocked the door to unfiltered mental health and wellness conversations.
I always can't get it right. Okay. Episode 13.
Activate.
Nurturing Black minds.
Yes.
Minority, quote unquote, minority health month in the month of July.
Yeah. Is it just health or is it mental health?
Mental health.
Mental health.
Yeah. Minority
Okay.
mental health month.
Okay.
In the
I like
month of
health a
July.
little bit better, but
Me too,
mental's cool too.
because it's everything,
Yeah.
you know. And one thing is always to the other, but
Yeah. And I think that's like part of it when we're talking about Black mental health. It's just like such an interconnected web of all of the things that comprise health, right? Like,
yeah.
in so many ways.
Well, I'm sure as we get into this conversation, what we'll end up getting to is one Black atrocity leads to the next.
Right, exactly.
Unfortunately. And
Yeah.
so it becomes really hard to parse out,
Yeah,
oh, well, this is this
right,
situation
right.
with your mental health versus
Yeah.
your health. It's like, well,
Yeah,
it's all wellness.
exactly. I was going to say it's another opportunity to just talk about how inextricable all of the various aspects of our health are from one another. Like, we like to compartmentalize a lot, and I think especially when it comes
We
to
being
mental
the
health-
world, not
Yes.
us.
Yeah, like people.
We like to
Like
get
the
straight to the matter. We're like, what?
The collective, right?
Yes.
Like our culture.
Y'all.
Yeah, y'all.
Not y'all that are listening. Y'all, the y'all that are listening that are going to forward this to the person that is them.
Forward this to them because we understand what's going on
With us.
with us and y'all.
With us and y'all.
We know it all.
Period.
It's so true, though. It's so true. It's so true. I mean, this is like a topic that, like, again, I'm glad we have a whole month on it because I feel like there's so much to cover. Like, even in just the, like, 2-minute exchange we just had, like, it was broad strokes, but it was a lot.
Yeah. We said so much with all those little 2-letter words.
Yeah, yeah. So,
And if you know, you know.
and if you know, you know.
If you know, you know. But first,
Yeah.
we drink.
First we drink.
And you made these
Yes.
gorgeous little concoctions.
I was trying to think of a name for them.
I'm sure we'll
and
have one by the time Easy Speaks. Sips.
Yes.
What? Easy Sips.
Easy Sips.
Launches on social media.
Yes.
So hopefully you're enjoying one of these, as of right now, unnamed
Yeah.
drinks.
But it's really good, I think, and you know, it's like an afternoon pick-me-up, but like, you know,
Yeah.
extra. So, cheersies.
Cheersies. Yeah, it's like a coffee, coconutty coffee frothy situation, yeah?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Cocoa coffee?
Cocoa coffee, that's really nice and light, which is remarkable because I know my pour. So,
Also, I think it's light, and I know you're poor, and that just makes me feel like
watch
they're
out
actually
now.
not that light.
Watch out now.
We're just used to this.
Make sure you sip it.
It's called sips for a reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take the sips easy.
Yes. Yes. Okay, so with Black mental health, there's so many things to uncover. I know for me, one of the things that comes top of mind is this idea of intergenerational trauma and how that concept spans across all of the different domains that we have been saying make up and comprise overall health and wellness, right? Like, you know, the financial aspects and the intergenerational trauma around that, the, you know, environmental trauma, you know, the physical health and welfare, and like, you know, throughout COVID, we talked a lot about, just the distrust from a lot of people of color in the medical system as a whole because of the very dark history of experimentation that took place in this country, that where people of color were the subjects of that experiment and the various experiments. And so there's a lot of trauma rooted in every kind of like domain of living. And then it all kind of, when you're in the mental health field, you kind of see it culminate in various ways, right? And so there's those like external factors. And then I also always think about that like cultural aspect, specifically as it relates to mental health and well-being, that can sometimes be a challenge as well in terms of people's openness to talk about mental health and to attribute various things that they're experiencing in life due to mental health challenges, and therefore willingness to get help, right? Appropriate help when necessary. So like it's like those two things often I see come to a head in the Black community. And when I think about that, it always stands out to me, the people who are like directly fighting against that by creating services that have that like understanding of how those two large concepts I just talked about have the interplay, and and like really try to like get at the root of the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that comes up for me is the disparity between how white people and people of color receive treatment completely differently, that their experiences are often different. The type and quality of care that they receive is often very different. That people of color are often perceived as being able to take more pain, can manage things better, like the lack of empathy because somebody is Black versus somebody who's white is wild. So I feel like the quality of care that Black women versus white women receive is different, or just Black people in general versus white people. But especially it comes up for me related to like maternal care, childbirth. There's just a substantially higher rate of Black women that die during childbirth. And then, based on that happening, even if the child dies or if the mother dies, then you have a whole family that is traumatized by that. If the child lives and it was a very difficult childbirth because it was terrible medical care, now you potentially have a child that has been impacted because of whatever happened during that childbirth and may have mental health challenges, developmental delays, plus the trauma that the mother, father, other family members have now gone through. And it just continues to perpetuate the challenges that happen related to generational care when it comes to Black people and how we kind of think about mental health.
No, I mean, I think there's so much science and statistics to support that it's challenging for minorities, Black people in particular, in the United States. One of the things that I remember jumped out at me, I forget which class I was taking in nursing school, but we were talking about just caring for different groups of people, right? It must have been like a cultural competency course or something like that. And one of the things that stood out to me was that there was a study that looked at blood pressure in people over time. And they found that, like most humans, our blood pressure fluctuates throughout the day depending on what's happening, how our body's receiving the information outside of us and our experiences. And so that is pretty similar across the board, right? The fluctuation in blood pressure. But then for Black people, when they go to sleep, that blood pressure stays slightly more elevated than that of a white person. And, you know, it's causation and correlation are two different things, right? So we always have to be careful about saying why that is. But I think overall, the takeaway is that, you know, blood pressure is also very highly correlated to anxiety and survival instincts, right? Our blood pressure elevates when we're feeling like we are in survival mode for lots of different biological reasons. And of course, that's going to affect our mental health, right? Our heart's beating faster, we're getting more adrenaline, like our heart's beating, you know, harder. And so down the line, that causes other health problems. And we know that a lot of like really chronic or significant health problems also have a high correlation when folks are experiencing that to other challenges, specifically around mental health. So it's like, again, there's just so many different ways that we can kind of look at the Black experience and see how like physically, you know, it's physically and from a mental health perspective, it's different, right? Like, you know, when we talk about things like food deserts, right, where there's not a lot of access to healthy, high quality foods, and we look at who lives in those areas, and then we look at what foods people are able to gain access to and consume, and now there are more and more studies coming out about how preservatives play a role in, you know, ADHD and potentially autism, and, you know, and so there's like a lot of intricacies around that, you know, and I think, you know, that's really challenging and really sad, and also, like we're talking about today, really affects mental health. And then there's also a part of it that I feel like, you know, there's a level of empowerment, right? So like when we were having the conversation earlier about, you know, when like a white person says, you know, slavery was so long ago, and it's like, okay, but like, do you understand that like from an emotional, from an experiential, from a health perspective, we're still feeling the impacts today? I think the overall message really is that like having empathy for other people's healing journeys is important. And also there's a level of like, at some point, there's an individual level of responsibility there, right? Like, because I think that sometimes the conversation is like, well, slavery was so like super recent, and like therefore it's impacting, and then that's like the end of the conversation, versus like it was super recent, and also there are so many things that we can do individually and as a society to like help create healing and foster healing. But when we stop at like we're justified in our reactions because of intergenerational trauma, I think we inadvertently like perpetuate the challenges that people are experiencing versus empowering them to say, hey, you recognize that. That's huge, right? Like the fact that you're saying like you're mentioning slavery in this conversation means that you have some knowledge of the impacts that it has, and that's actually really great place to start healing from, right? So I think sometimes that like piece of the conversation goes missing, and we just focus on the like, you know, and it's important to know the source of the problem. We talk about that all the time. We have our little iceberg that we talk about, making sure that we know the source of the problem, but at some point it's like, you know, what are we doing individually as a society and collectively to combat those things, you know?
Yeah,
So.
I also think that's becomes a difficult point in that conversation, right? Because that's where the healing begins, and it can be a challenge to come up with, you know, I don't know where to take it from there, and that can be part of that generational experience is, you know, the learned behavior of, you know, this has been the thing that we've talked about in our family, but there hasn't been a lot of healing. And so if you're talking with someone who is pushing you around, like, that's great that you have that self-awareness, and what are you doing to start to heal from it? I think that's sometimes where those contentious conversations can happen, and I think it's important to, if you're going to engage in a conversation like that with somebody, regardless of whatever your own race is, to be knowledgeable enough to say, like, here are some resources, or here's a great book you might want to read. It doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily have to be, here's a website, get a therapist,
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly.
that's a good way to turn people off.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like, most people right
Yes.
from the very beginning aren't ready for you to say, go get a therapist,
Yes,
right?
yes, right.
So, like, maybe it's this great book I read, or this movie I watched, or this article, right? But something that actually leads to, like, a next step in helping move somebody's thought process and healing journey to the next place.
Yep.
And not just thinking about being stuck in that moment, or like, it can be really hard to get out of, I have felt so angry, upset,
Right.
hurt, sad
Right.
for so long in this space.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like it doesn't feel like there's any place to go after that.
Right.
So
Yeah.
you have to be thoughtful when you have these kinds of conversations, I think,
Yeah.
to know, like, what are you going to say
Right.
for the next thing?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's like also part of like the broader conversation that, continuously comes up for us, I think, around mental health and our approach to it as a community, like our cultural approach to it, is that, like, again, mental health is a medical problem with social solutions, right? So, like, when we talk about lived experience professionals, or we talk about other things, like in the Black community, one of the places that people go to heal is church, right? And we know that sometimes that's not the most healing space, right? But that's due to a lack of knowledge, right? So when there are efforts to help bring people knowledge,
Don't come for us
information,
in the comments over that.
and resources. Yeah, I know
Someone's-
that's a very
someone's coming
controversial
for
thing.
Someone's coming for your neck in the comments
That's
over
a
that.
very controversial thing, but like,
You better say more words.
I don't, anyone who's ever gone to church knows. Like, I feel like I don't need to, like, we've all had our feelings hurt at church at the bare minimum. Right? Like, our feelings have been hurt at church at the bare minimum. And, that's part of life. But I'm just saying, like, I think, sometimes we sugarcoat the problem and say, like, it's going to be fixed, right? Because, of course, it's great to believe in a higher power, right? But then, like, also, we know through, even if you really study the Bible, like, action is what gets you to the thing, right? Always.
Well, it's like that story, that parable I told a few episodes ago about
Yes.
God sending
The
like,
rafts
the boat
and
and
the
the
boat.
raft. And
Yeah.
it's like, you chose not to get on.
Exactly, right? So, like, God's always going to be there, but, like,
Yeah.
what are our actions, right? So, I think doing things to help bring education and resources to places where Black people are already going to heal is important, rather than just saying, hey, go find a therapist, right? Let's make sure that pastors and priests and church folk also have the information that they need to understand how mental health manifests and the things that we need to do to kind of, overcome trauma as a community, right? Because that's a very powerful thing. Community healing is huge, right? And so,
And those are also very difficult conversations. I know, like, we can talk about our own experiences, going to different churches of all different religions and trying to engage with them around conversations with mental health. And it still seems like in that space, people want to make these changes and start to have conversations, but it seems really difficult to sort of like marry the two, where
Yeah.
I think, like,
it's a process.
we really see it
Clearly.
very
Yeah,
clearly.
we're like,
And-
it makes, just do this, this, and this.
and you're
problem
like,
solved.
right, and we're like the kind of people who are like, I mean, all of the things are connected. Hello,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, but I think people, not everybody believes that, right, or sees the world that way, and so it can be really challenging to go into a space and talk about some of those things. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of like facts that when we've done presentations in church communities about, how early on in life young people feel like they can't come back to the church to talk
Right.
about things, right?
Right.
And so we want to have those conversations and say, let's create those safe spaces here.
Open, inclusive.
Right. How do you do that?
Yeah.
And I think these are institutions, right? It's like the other systemic work that we do with large agencies that are
Yeah.
providing funding, whether it be for a multitude of different, reasons or whatever their particular line items that they hold
Yeah.
in the systems of mental health life.
Yeah.
When you try to make change in these large institutions that are standing, it's very difficult. Like
Yeah.
sometimes it feels like that wind-up toy
Yeah,
that
yeah.
it like hits the wall and you're like, "Tink," and then you just
Yeah.
go off in the other way, and then
Yeah.
you hit the wall again. But we keep going back
Yes.
to crash into the wall because eventually we'll get through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's all a process, right? Like if you think about it, religion and the church were like the main institution even before government in this country.
Right.
Right. So it's very deeply rooted and, talk about intergenerational teachings, trauma, the church is a pipeline for a lot of that stuff,
Right.
and so thinking about like how to really infiltrate that space that inherently is very beautiful and very nurturing and based on community and people being healthy and happy and also making sure that like perspective shift is happening and cultural shifts are happening, but like again, when we talk about these things, it's like huge concepts, right? And then like trying to get it down to an individual level can be a little challenging, like figuring out what your own individual role in that process is, right? And
Exactly.
And like
I think, like we are currently working with a church program.
yeah,
And, doing some things with youth, right? Young adults. And
Yep.
it's been amazing to see, like, in a setting that is kind of around religion, but not really. Like, it's run through like a pastoral team, but they don't really base it that much in religion. But I noticed that when we had our last wrap up, that they invited some parents to come,
Yeah.
and there weren't that many parents that came.
yeah,
And I think that's one of those places where, as families, it may be hard to change your own beliefs or take those steps, but if you see, like, this is something that I think could be beneficial for my kid, or this is something I was never able to do for myself or still don't feel ready, but there's an opportunity for your child to be able to engage in something like that, those are ways that you can start to make small steps
Yeah.
to help your child or even your family, because a lot of times kids come home and they are super excited about what just happened or what activity we did with them, and they bring home all the things that we do with them related to mental health or put these practices into play, and a lot of times those are the things that ripple out into families and
Yeah.
really start to make some changes and have people think about things a little bit differently.
yeah, it's true. It's true. Getting involved on like a community level makes such a huge difference, and like the ripples are so apparent, you know.
And
Yeah.
it's really lovely to see, I think, the young adults and teenagers really thinking about their mental health.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like the youth that we talk to are very open about what's happening in their lives.
Yeah.
We create an open space and have a lot of understandings about the sanctity of that space.
Yeah.
And I think, youth are really able to come in and really share. And I think that's really important. This last group was mostly kids of color.
Yeah,
I think almost all of them.
All of them were
Yeah.
of color, yeah.
And so to have that kind of a space where people are definitely getting things out of it and coming back week after week.
Yeah.
These are the tides of change that
Yeah.
are happening in mental health that
Yeah.
I think we really need. and these are the leaders of the future generation. So
Yeah. No, I'm so excited. When I think about like Gen Z and below, I definitely have my like eye roll moments where I'm like,
Gen Z,
I can't.
oh my
But
God.
like, they are also really giving us all a lesson on acceptance and celebrating people and being confident. And so like, even like with the church conversation, one of the things that we heard from the group that we were working with was that like a lot of kids are just not going to church anymore. Right? So they're recognizing that that's not a space that they can be healed in, and they're deciding not to frequent it. And that's a shame, because there's so many positive things about church, and there's so
Yeah.
much potential for it to be an amazing thing in all of our communities and our lives. And so like that's why I love the work that we're doing, or like the work that people are doing in the space to really help bring people up to speed about mental health, the interplay between all of the different things that people experience and their mental and physical health and wellness. And like that, you can still do that and believe in God, right? You can still
Yeah.
do that and have a spiritual practice.
Exactly.
And, that's
You know,
actually
like I think we,
healthy
even
way.
our team with our organization, and even like between you and I, like our spiritual practices aren't like exactly the same.
Yeah.
You know, I think a little bit more like religion based
Yeah.
practices than you do.
Yeah.
But we both have like spiritual practices, but we have a lot of team members that work for us in a mental health organization that are deeply religious,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And they're some of the best people that we have, right?
Right.
And they're doing the work that is super important to this community and to our organization and in mental health. And also, like, we know that on Sundays they're going to be at church, and so like we're not calling them to do an event on a Sunday or whatever the case may be, because
Right.
we like respect that too. And so I think it goes to show that like there's that change that's happening, and
Yeah.
that you really can, like, if you think about how things work together. And I'm a believer of like diving headfirst into like the space and like figuring things out, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so I think we have people that are like that
Yeah.
around us, and we keep finding like-minded people
Yeah.
in the world. And so that, I think, is where real change starts to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's church, it's schools. There's a lot of work to be done in schools around Black mental health as well. Black children get suspended at a way higher rate than their white student counterparts, and it's really just an interpretation and a perspective. And I think that kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about like, the perspective of the Black experience can be a little bit different than what it actually is, based on lots of different factors. And it infiltrates all of our staples as a community: school, church, home, religion, like all of it gets affected as a result. And so I think at the end of the day, like, it takes a lot of like meeting people where they're at, because a lot of that perspective shifting that needs to happen is a result of a lack of information or a lack of resources or whatever the case may be, right? And so, I remember, and I'll just tell this story as like a quick anecdote, because I think it really like encapsulates like my perspective on like all of this, is that like, when it comes to discrimination, racism, and all the things that we've talked about today that infiltrate systems, the root cause, if we're thinking about the iceberg, is information, knowledge, resources, and also the fact that we're all the effect of the environments we grew up in and the DNA we were born with. And so I remember I was in my master's program, and I went to a school that was mostly minority students. So it was a school that offered evening classes and night classes to get your master's in mental health. And I chose to go there because I was able to work during the day and go to school at night and get an amazing education and degree. And it was also a place where it was like very much like Brockton, like a majority minority situation, right?
Ugh, that term.
I know, but
Gag me, spoon.
I know you hate that term, but it gets to the point. It gets to the
Worse.
point.
I know.
It gets to the point.
It's so annoying.
But
I'm saying.
so I go to the school and like has therapist training, you know, role plays is huge in that setting, right? Like you have to really, there's no way to escape a role play. Like you are forced to put yourself in somebody else's perspective and feel, even just for a minute or two, what it would be like to be somebody. And so there was this role play situation that was like, so you're like a therapist of color, and somebody is court mandated to come see you for therapy, but they are racist and they're white. Like, what do you do, right, in that scenario? And I remember like all my classmates were like, oh, no, see you later. Like, he got to go. I'm going to refer him out. I'm going to write the court and be like, see you later. I can't. And I remember just being like, well, I would take that as an opportunity to like teach him and meet every aspect of his hatred with nothing but kindness and just me being who I am, in the hopes that that's going to help him to realize something, right? Like, that's a therapeutic process. And, you know, I understand that that's some level of me putting myself in the crossfires, right? But as a healer and a helper, and as someone who understands that that person who's racist, who's coming to me, like was once a child who was being told how to be racist and like live and be in this world in that way, right? Like that person was born without racism, right? And so I'm choosing to find that in them. And so, you know, I know that that like ability for me may come from a level of like privilege or just like understanding, you know, or whatever the case may be. But like, I think that that's important, right? Like that we don't just say like these people who are doing hurtful things in the world. These people who are doing hurtful things in the world, whoever they may be, right? Who are doing things that are racist, saying things that are racist. Like I look at that and I think to myself, damn, that sucks. Like that's like you to have to live your life with so much hatred in your heart, you know? And, you know, I think that there's a level of that that's important too, right? Not just like focusing on, you know, the challenge. And so like, I think there's a level of like collective healing that has to happen, but also like healing for everyone, right? The second we start to like separate out who deserves healing and what kind of healing is more valid than another kind of healing, I think that's where we like perpetuate the cycle and make it worse. So
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Like most things that we come to in the end, it's all about a good ass collaboration.
Yeah.
Listen,
Accepting people for who they are and trying to move forward from there.
there's no banger like a good collab.
That's right.
You know?
That's true.
That's it.
That's it.
That's how you get the club bangers,
That's
baby.
it.
It's
That's
the
it.
collab.
That's it.
That's how it always works out, is when
Yeah.
you can come together in partnership. Doesn't mean you agree on absolutely everything,
Yeah.
but there's always, I always feel like there is common ground somewhere.
Yes.
And it's how hard
Do we want to
are
work
you willing to work
to find it?
to get there?
Yep.
You know? And I think we can improve the mental health of not just Black people, but all people.
Yeah.
That sounded a little bit too much like All Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter, and I did not mean that.
Well,
so just to be super
Okay.
clear on
It
it.
shouldn't be versus. That's the whole thing.
I know, but I just want to, for me,
All lives matter.
say that. Good for you.
That's true.
Good. The comments are going to be like, bam, 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 bam,
It's
bam.
true.
You're going to have to hide behind capture.
It's true. My life is not more important than another human's.
That's true. That's true, but still.
That's all.
Agreed. That's what we're saying.
Yeah.
Is that we're all important
Yes.
and we need to collectively see each other and work together.
Yeah.
And I think as we wrap up,
Yeah.
we should say that we could go on another 40 minutes if we started rattling off like resources and all of that
Yes.
kind of stuff. So
Yes.
in the description for today's episode,
Yes.
we'll link lots of different things. I would
Yeah.
love to, I think we should throw in some books,
Yes.
throw in some,
I've got a really good documentary called The Color of Fear that I think everyone on the planet should watch.
okay.
It's amazing. It's kind of hard to come by, but we'll put that in there as well.
And definitely some links for
Therapeutic.
therapy, some books, whatever it is,
Yeah.
some different things.
It's a huge topic, so it's,
So much, yeah.
Yeah.
I think in future episodes we'll talk about things more specific. But as we're coming into our first few episodes
yeah,
here at the EasySpeak, we're like hitting things broad.
broad strokes.
You know, this
Yeah.
is who we are, how we feel, how we act,
Yeah.
what we drank,
Yep.
all
That's
that good
right.
stuff.
Yeah.
So follow us on all of our socials.
Yes. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, and review.
Yes.
And comment and let us know what you think. Like, I think that's like
Yeah.
one of the biggest things is
Yeah.
that I really want to hear people's thoughts.
Oh, you
on
going today?
all of the different things that we say. And, you know, I think that's what it's all about. It's about dialogue and
Yeah.
conversation. And like mental health is one of those topics that needs to be an open forum. So,
Totally. Or
yeah.
what else do you want us to talk about?
Yeah.
Know anybody good that we should have on?
Yes.
As a guest? Ooh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, we are about ready for some guests.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have our list going, but we always love a good referral,
That's right.
a good collabo.
A good collab. Yes. Cool.
I think that's a
It's a wrap for today.
wrap around.
It's definitely been a little bit of a heavy episode, so stick around for the meditation minute if you can. Mm-hmm. And make sure that you just like decompress because these are hard topics to, you know, talk about and think about and then go about the rest of your day like nothing happened.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
And if you had a cocktail, then I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll drink to that. Yeah. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.